Hello, folks. Today we're going to try and cover a lot of things about using Desmos as a tool. You're going to need to use it in this project that you're currently doing, but these skills I hope will translate beyond this project. That's kind of why we're doing it. So the first thing you're going to need to do is be able to get to Desmos Graphing Calculator, and that's pretty easy to do. You can just open your Chrome browser, and mine's being a little weird, but here we go. And I have mine kind of bookmarked here. I don't know how that happened, but you can just type in Desmos. And preferably, since we use Desmos for a lot of things, you're going to want the graphing or graphing calculator. So either one of those is fine, but this is really what you want to look for. Wherever you're at right here, I think is what we're after. If you haven't already, once it's up and running like this, you can always log in. My was just in there, so mine, you can see my name, but you can just click there where it says, if it says login, and then use your Google credentials from school. And then you can save work and things like that I think are going to be really helpful. All right. So the first thing, if I think it's best if you take notes on this so that you have it. But number one is going to be that you write in your notebook Desmos notes. And then under that, you want to, this first thing I'm going to show you is creating a table. Okay. So this is how we create a table. That's going to be really useful for a lot of things. Specifically in the future, I think it's going to be really helpful for things like a science class, or if you're doing like a community project where you want to show graphically why your cause is important and you want to create a professional looking representation of data. A table is going to be helpful for that. So the way you create a table, and just about a lot of other things, is this big plus over here in the corner. I think is, oh, sorry, I want to make this something you can see better. Um, let's try this. But we're going to want to go up here to this plus, and when you click on it, you're going to see a couple of things. We're going to go to table, okay? And for this table, let's just enter in some data points like um, they can be any, 1, 2, 3, 4. Depends on your situation. But at the moment, we're going to enter in just a couple of them. Maybe they're not even sequential. Let's go 3, and then maybe 7, and then like a 10. And I'm going to say that with this particular data, it's somebody's using money that they may have had in a bank. And so we're going to make that on week 3. After they've taken money out, what they have in their bank still is $150.50. And then after week 7's withdrawal, they have $124.05, or 50 cents, I should say. And then maybe on week 10, you see that they had $105. And that's what we're going to use. Okay. Now, the next thing, so that's creating a table. Again, your X's can be whatever your independent variable is. For mine, it happens to be currently weeks. And then your Y, which is your dependent variable or your output, that's going to be anything that you feel, in this case, it's money in a bank. And as a result, we want to now go over and learn how to label our axes. That's going to be also helpful in creating professional graphs. So in your notes, you're going to want to do labeling the axes next, okay? So to do that, and our next thing, we're going to want to see this wrench. This wrench is how we can manipulate what we're seeing here in this, what I call the viewing window. This is where we see our data, we see our graph. And so we want to change the viewing window, which we're going to do. We want to label the axes. All of that happens in the wrench. This plus and minus down here lets us zoom in and out based on just various increments. So for instance, if I said minus, it would zoom out some more. You'll notice that the numbers on the graph changed to 5s. If we zoom out again, now the numbers change to factors of 10. So these are pluses zooming in. But right now, that's not helpful for us because we need to get all the way out to where we can see points at like when x equals 3, we need the y to be 150. And we only see it as 6. So let's change the labels. So let's put labels on our graph right now so we know what we're doing. So we click on that wrench, and then we can come down here to the label for x. And I told you for my particular case that that's going to be weeks. So I type in weeks. That's going to help me see it. And then the label, this would be money in my bank. You can just label it like that. Like this, we're good. And you'll notice that it showed up right here. And then you can kind of see it behind this drop-down menu right here. But we're going to just kind of look at it as we see it. And the label looks good. It helps me remember what we're doing. Next, we want to create a better viewing window. So right now, I don't see any data. And more importantly, we want to do some analysis here where we see the fact that, for instance, my x values, my independent values in this case, they're not negative. They're 3, 7, 10. We probably want to be looking forward, not backwards too much. Negative weeks probably aren't really something we care about when we're talking about our bank account. Doesn't mean that it doesn't mean something, but right now we're kind of looking at the fact that if we're trying to figure out what's happening with our money in our bank, we want to know what happened before we started taking money out. And that would be when the weeks were 0. So negatives aren't really helpful to us. We also only have numbers here at 10, but we're probably going to be interested beyond that since we still have $105. But at the moment, let's just work with what we know. Also, our Y values, we can't have negative money in a piggy bank, right, or in any bank. So we don't need to worry about negatives for our Y values, and we need them to go up way higher than the 6 you see right here. So to adjust your window so that it's useful and important, we want to go back to this wrench. And here is where it says x-axis, right? Here's where we can change that. We talked about how we don't need to see all the way to negative anything, but I'm going to leave a little negative window so I can kind of for sure see the y-axis. So for me, sometimes I just start with -1. I might move that out if the graph gets a little bigger. And since 10 is where I'm at, I'm going to want to go ahead and be a little bit further over. So maybe I pick, in this case, maybe like 11 or 12, and I can adjust that later after I get more information. Now I want to focus on the Y value. We don't, again, as we talked about, we don't really need negatives, but I am going to want to see the Y-axis. So I'm going to leave it at maybe -1. And you'll notice that the window is changing. We still don't see any data here though, because we're only still going up to 6. For me, I see that my highest Y value is 150.5. I'm going to be interested in that 0. But at the moment, since this is what I know, the 150 over here, 0.5, I'm going to go ahead and make my maximum Y in the window be, I don't know, maybe 155, a little bit above my points. And look at that. It's not really, but you can start to see the data, right? So that's one way that we can help find our data is by looking at that table. This is obviously what we talked about in class called discrete data. It's just points currently. We need to build a model and all of that. And I think that's going to be really, really important. But right now, this is what we know. So let's talk about how we can next build a model and then come back to Desmos. I'm going to do something I hope is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm going to switch over to how to build a model. Well, let's just talk about it because I might need to make that a different video. But when we build this model off to the side, because I don't think I can do it with switching to my overhead, I'm going to find the difference in the output, which is me finding the difference between 150.5 and 124.5. And I know I can get a calculator if I want and take 124.5 minus 150.5. And that's going to give me 26, negative 26 specifically. And then I have to find the difference in the input, the difference in the independent, the difference in the X. And so that from 3 to 7 is 4. So I put in my calculator negative 26 divided by negative 4, and I'm going to get negative 6.5. So I know that I have a line that I can graph that's going to be y equals negative 6.5x. We also need to know the initial value. We need to be able to calculate that. And that's going to be really, really important. And that's probably for a different video or notes from your class. But I'll give you a brief description here. I'm going to actually multiply negative 6.5 by 3. That's my input. And that's going to give me negative 19.5. And I know that I have to add that to something, and that's going to equal 150.5. So if I do that algebra, I'm going to come out with plus 170. Now you can start to see down here, by the way, as I type, that my line's starting to show up. This is a great way for me to check if I've done my math right. You can use this on assignments to make sure you do your math right, because if I type in this initial value, it should go through all these points. And once I do that, you can look up here and see that I have it through all these points. So it's a great model. It's a great fit. But I also know that my window needs to be adjusted now. First of all, I can't see up here where it goes to the y-axis. And I also can't see where it goes to the x-axis. And so I come back here and I start to mess around here. I need it to be at least 170. We know that's the y-intercept. So I'm going to pick a number a little bigger than 170, maybe 175. And we can see this y-axis, the y-intercept right here, which is perfect. We also need to move this x out further. We see at week 12 and it's dropping all the time. That's the negative slope coming into play. So maybe I'm going to pick 30, say. And hopefully we see that. If not, we'll just come in here and we move it out a little more. I also don't see my y-axis very well, so I might want to move this down. Notice I can see my y-axis down here better. That's just, it's kind of difficult when you teach this to 8th graders because you want things to be certain. And this is more kind of like an art where you just kind of how you feel. But now that I've done that where I can see the y-axis better, I feel good about it. So I'm going to get out of here. I am pretty curious about this number down here where it's 0. See, this tells me a couple of things. And I think this is where analysis comes into play really well. I think it's really wise for you to see that's 26.15. That means that this person could take out their $6.50 on week 26, and they would still have money in the bank, but they aren't going to have a full $6.50. And if you can just know that, that's important. It means on day 27 or week 27, they're going to go to the bank and take money out. They can do that, but they're not going to have a full $6.50. And if you are someone who can do this, you can actually know from that decimal how much money they have. This decimal tells you that they have 0.154 of 650 left, or in other words, 15.4%. You can get a calculator out and type 0.154 times 6.5, and you'll know exactly how much money is left in there. That's pretty advanced for 8th grade, so don't feel pressure about that. I would say doing a good 7, 8 level type extension, you get it beyond what is expected of 8th graders, is to know that you have a little money in there left after week 26, but it's not a full $6.50. I think that would be really, really important. Okay. All right. So that is creating a line. You can just type it in, and also creating your window so that you can see everything and it's not a bunch of wasted space. If we went back, I don't want you to do this, but I just want you to see why it's important to create a good graph. Let's say we just had like negative 30 here, like it's a square window, and then maybe this is like negative 100. I think you can look at this, and while you still see your graph, you see a whole bunch of wasted space over here on the left in quadrant 2. You see wasted space in quadrant 3, doesn't do us any good. You see wasted space in quadrant 4, isn't helping us understand what's going on. And it makes this graph where we want to spend our time examining what's happening harder to do so. So that's why we like to have what is referred to as a tight viewing window. And I know that in my class, when I grade my students' quality of work, that it is based on if they have things like that also, a very professional scenario. So here we are back to the viewing window that we picked that is dictated by this information over here. And we're going to work on the very last part of this video, which is how to export your graph. Oftentimes you want to include a graph, especially if you're a science student, for instance, or later when you're in economics or maybe history, or you're working on trying to put together a proposal to make some change in your community. You're going to want to show data. You're going to want to have a graph in that document. And this is a wonderful tool for that. You want to have a great viewing window to reference, and you want to be able to export that graph so that you can use it in your document, whether it be a Word document, Google document. And the way we're going to do that is right up here. This little window where you can export and share a graph is important. You click on that, and there's 3 ways you can export it. You can just share a link so somebody can come back in and see what you've done. I don't really like that. You can also embed it if you're doing something digitally on a web page. But I think the most common use of this, especially moving forward, is going to be export. When you export the graph, you have some choices, and you want to think about the document that you want it in. I think this is a fine, great graph. I personally kind of like the lines to be a little thicker, depending on things. I think that generally is better. You can make them really thick. And I think it's up to you and your taste and what you're building and what you're using in your document and how you want it to look. You can also look at it from various formats. I mean, large rectangle, in my opinion, is too big. It's all this wasted space and whiteness kind of is a distraction, and it's really hard to examine this and see your numbers. But sometimes it might be useful. And you can examine some of these small. I think that's a little too small. I don't get a lot of detail there. So use this and see. Generally speaking, for most assignments, I would say in middle school and early high school, medium for the square and medium for the presentation and the lines is pretty good. And then all you do when you got what you want is you download it. And then you can even click here. I think right now you can change it to here, but PNG files are fine. You download this, and then you got to just examine where it's downloaded. In this particular case, since I'm using Chrome, it'll just put it in a generic Chrome file, and I've downloaded a few different graphs in my day. You can see these here, but you're going to want to locate that. If you're on a Chromebook, it will usually download to a little piece of memory that you do have on the Chromebook. It should provide you an opportunity to save it to your Google Drive. And if you have glitches there, it might actually just require you to have a thumb drive where you can plug it into your USB port and download to that. But you're going to have to maybe work with your teacher and things, maybe even your librarian on how to do that if you got some problems. But that's how you're going to be able to retrieve it and then put it into a document. But that's how Desmos does it, and most importantly, how we make a good graph. And I think that's about it for now, everyone. Thanks for